So first of all, this is the ecosystem today, right? A multi-billion-dollar ecosystem cemented by Google and Apple, both their operating system and where apps get downloaded, both through Google Play and the store. This is where your friend tells your friend about an app, and you go here and you download it. And these companies, unbeknownst to a lot of people, are actually monopolizing this ecosystem, meaning there's only really two channels that you can go by if you're a developer. So if this group of people start an app tomorrow and you're thinking about raising money and launching an application, you're kind of forced to go down this channel. But as we'll discuss, this is a very problematic and rocky road to actually get to the top of the chart and hopefully get your app seen and discovered.
To be real specific there too, the companies you're talking about have KPIs that are different than yours. You don't go to Apple and say, we're going to make you a lot of revenue through in-app transactions and expect love and support on the storefront. You go to Apple and say, my new features are going to sell more phones for you. And then you get editorial coverage and other help. So the things that we need to do to get our results in the ecosystem don't necessarily line up with the app stores.
So yeah, their objectives are not aligned with the developer ecosystem. And whether you've started an app or you've read these sorts of articles, building an app, raising money towards an app is one thing, but actually getting Google or Apple to pay attention is very, very challenging. Seeing it firsthand with a number of different startups just trying to get a phone call or an email back from Apple. They're inundated with thousands of requests. Maybe you're lucky and you've hit that sort of pinnacle Tinder or Venmo or another app that just sort of skyrockets through word of mouth and user base, then you kind of get a phone call from them. But for the most part, most developers, most startups, and not just startups, even large publishers really struggle with actually getting into the store, which is kind of the first dilemma. And even once you get approved, and this is a glorifying day, being worked with a lot of different companies over the last few years in the developer ecosystem, you still have an up-road battle, both as it relates to getting featured and heard in the store itself.
Yeah, I can't stress enough the tactics we would use. We would send an email saying, we happen to be in town, Google, would you like to get a coffee? Apple, would you like to get a coffee? And 6 out of 7 times not get a reply. And finally, well, if you're in town anyway, we'll get a coffee. And be like, great. And then we book the flight and show up just for the coffee, because it was so valuable to actually have a connection to what's going on inside. If there's a big lesson from the takeaways here, it's that you don't really know what causes great performance behind the scenes. And so getting approved is just the starting point.
Right, and so now you're approved, and now you're dealt with this next sort of dilemma, which is there are a number of different apps that are charting, probably as a result of actually money being raised to help chart. That's the kind of byproduct of UA dollars being spent. But there's also different channels as far as where are you going to sit, and then what store? Are you iOS? Are you Android? Do you have the resources to build for both? So continued uphill battle. If you are lucky enough, in today's climate, it's a lot more challenging to have raised VC money, then you do the sort of classic UA, right? And that's mobile in-app performance advertising. ironSource is one of the top players in that game. The Ad Colony, Opera, Vungle, AppLovin, Google, Facebook, all great channels for discovery. But getting here is the 0-1%. And I would imagine most of us have kind of that 15 or 20 apps that we have on our phone. Some are more service and utility oriented based on our own needs. But for the most part, the idea of charting and simply charting and sitting there for a while could come off the heels of a massive commitment as far as money. Not only spending money, but in the performance ecosystem, it's a lot more complicated. There's lifetime value to considerations. There's sort of after you have the download, what does that mean? So a very complex conversation.